Today I'm going to show you how I improved my portrait paintings from this to this in just 5 days. And I did all of this using a special art process that I like to call
the cemetery improvement process.
Because that's where your old art goes to rot. And I pretty much have been using this same process to improve my art over these last couple of years. And it definitely shows. Like, look at this terrible piece of art from a couple of years ago compared to what I do now. I do not want that crawling back out of its grave. So let's just move on to showing y'all what exactly is this cemetery improvement process. Alrighty, so before we get into day 1, I kind of had to show you day 0 and how all of this started of me wanting to improve my portraits. So pretty much I was minding my own business, doing some practice portrait painting, you know, like where you throw shapes and colors on top, the huge, when suddenly an ugly face appeared on my canvas. The audacity, am I right? And I was like, this cannot be happening. So I tried again, but this time with a reference. And you want to know what happened? That's right, another ugly face appeared on my canvas. It was a very sad day. At this point, I was pretty frustrated. I'm sure y'all would be too, which meant that I needed to pull out my secret weapon, my cemetery improvement process, because I can't keep making these ugly portraits. That's just really bad. Okay, so day 1 of my cemetery improvement process, and there's a reason why this process is called a cemetery, not just because you throw your dead art into it when you're done with it, but because each day rises you out of your pitiful lack of skill grave, all the way from bones to flesh, pretty much like a zombie. Starting with day 1, obviously the bones. And since I'm only trying to improve portraits this time, I am only focusing on the human skull. I like to start with some basic sketches, and I only do like 2 or 3 just because my focus is on painting rather than drawing. So I do a front of the skull, a side version, and a 3/4 of the skull. While I am drawing these skulls, I'm thinking about how the structures move and how they work together. Now moving on to painting of the skull. So I start painting in some big basic shapes, and I keep refining those shapes and adding details as I go. And the most important part in making sure that I am learning about the skull while I'm painting and drawing is that I'm applying new aspects of the skull that I have forgotten about or have not learned to what I already know about the human face, anatomy, and the skull itself. But once you understand the basic structures, so the bones, it's very helpful to know because you can build upon those basic fundamental structures. Moving on to day number 2. So we are starting to crawl out of our lack of skill grave, and we gotta throw some muscles on those bones because you can't crawl out unless you have some muscles, which means that day 2 is all about painting muscles. Now, I really like muscles because they add a lot of structure and they're just really cool to draw in my opinion. And same as in day 1, I start off with some sketches. I only do 2 this time, so the front and the side. And a lot of the times I like to label my studies. So like where the muscles are, what the bones are, just because when you know what they're named, you kind of understand their function because their function also relates to their name. But in this case, I already kind of know most of the muscles and I'm only focusing on painting rather than studying what the muscles do because I'm trying to improve my observational skills as well as my anatomical structural skills, which then I move on to painting the muscles, which I do a 3/4. And I'm doing the same thing as I did with my skull, was starting with big shapes and then refining the shapes, adding more detail, making it look cool. Because there are a lot of things that attach to muscles, you're not really just drawing the muscles itself because you also have the tendons and ligaments and obviously the bones because that's what the muscle attaches to. So I guess this would be more like the musculoskeletal skull instead of just like drawing the muscles. What I learned the most from this muscle study was the striations of the muscles. So when you are looking at the different facial muscles, you can see how they move and what directions they go in. That's helpful when you are painting, when you can like paint the strokes. It kind of is nice to understand the flow of how the muscles work so you can paint in the same direction. Okay, now we get to day 3. This time we are actually like pretty much almost out of our lack of skill grave. And now we're gonna put some flesh on the bones and the muscles. So for day 3, I am doing male portraits just because male and female structures are very different to each other, so it's important to do them separately. And I do the same thing as I did in day 1 and day 2 of drawing sketches first. And this time you can see that I am using this reference. I did use references for the other ones, but I didn't record them, so sorry about that. But these, you can see the references I am using. And once when I finish sketching it out, I then like to take the reference image and I overlay my sketch on top and fix the sketch that I did to make it fit with the reference image, just so that I can see what exactly I am missing, like where my observational skills are lacking. So you can see that the portraits are not that different to the reference, but I definitely make males more angular and masculine. So that's something I should fix to make them look more realistic. From there, I go and do the portrait painting. Now, just like the other paintings, you start with big shapes and then you move on to smaller shapes and smaller details, refining it and keep painting it. Now, as you watch me paint, you'll see me add different colors to the skin. And that's because skin actually is a lot of different colors depending on where on the face you are. So typically for most faces, a lot of red is in the cheeks, like the middle area and the nose, as well as the lips. And you'll actually see more greens and yellows towards the tips of the face, so the chin and the forehead. Moving on to the female portraits, similar to what I did with the male portraits, I do 2 sketches, a front and a side of 2 females, and I also draw on top of the reference. Now you can see from these 2 that I make my females look ugly. This is probably why I made my portraits look ugly, because I was making their features way too angular, just like the males. So I really need to focus on softening stuff up and really making it more appealing, which then dives into what I need to work on for this painting of the female that I'm doing right now. And you can see the reference image that I'm using. And this one I kind of struggled with just because the lighting was a little bit different than what I was used to, because I'm used to more contrasting lighting. And so just like the other paintings, I started with basic shapes, refining those shapes, getting the smaller details, all that stuff. Now when it comes to painting from reference, is about training your eye to compare different areas of your subject in order to make an accurate drawing or painting. What I mean is like the distance of the eyes to the nose, maybe like where the hair falls on the face. You're pretty much comparing shapes to other shapes, making sure they fit and match. Same thing with colors. You're just comparing them to each other, be like, oh, this part is more green, I'll just add a little bit of touch of that. This part is more red, just gotta add some of that. You just keep refining it till you're happy. So these are the 4 days so far, starting with day 1, the skulls, day 2, muscles or musculoskeletal, day 3, the male face, and day 4, the female face. And now we are at day 5, where I need to apply everything that I have just learned to this portrait that you are watching me make right now. So just like all of the other paintings, start with big shapes, and I am using this reference while I am painting my character, just because I realized the importance of following a portrait is very helpful. And you don't really have to stick with the portrait, like copy it one for one. You can use the different aspects of your reference image to the actual painting. So what I mean is I use the same angle of this reference as my character, as well as similar lighting. And while I'm working, you can totally see the difference of the reference and what I am painting. While I'm painting this, I am thinking about the structures that I had just reviewed. So the skull, I am focusing on how the structure works. So the cheekbone, where that is, how those teeth would line up, how that would go with the chin, ultimately the whole entire skull all together. And then how would the muscles lay on top of that and work to make the skull functional. Then slapping the skin on top and making the character come to life. So you can see that I'm applying my observations of the different colors, so like the red cheeks, more green forehead and chin. And I'm also trying to make this face look more attractive, because you can see right now it looks very orange. So I'm gonna desaturate the skin to make it stand out from her orange hair. And how I do that is I just add like some blue on top. And this is a super simple trick that you can do if you're having a problem with balancing the contrast of the hair and the face to make sure that they look different and that the face really stands out. I'm actually surprised of how well this turned out considering the amount of time that I put in, so only 5 days. But each of the pages that I did, they only took like at most 2 hours to do. So if you're someone that is also trying to improve your art, this might be a method that really helps so that you can overall just improve your art. With this cemetery improvement process, you are focusing on improving your observational skills as well as your knowledge of the human anatomy. So you're kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone, essentially. And I think that's why I improved so quickly, was because I was lacking some of that knowledge as well as lacking the observational skills. So if you too are feeling stuck with your art, this might be a process for you to try out. Let me know if it works. I don't know, works for me, might work for you. So if you are looking to improve your anatomy, I made this video right here where you can watch and learn about some anatomy tips that I have learned over the years. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.